If you dropped Broly into the sacred world of the Kais, I think Shin, aka Supreme Kai, would literally pass out from pure terror before a single punch was ever thrown. Why? Let's just think about it. Broly is a walking nuclear weapon who goes completely brainless more often than not when he's angry. While the Supreme Kai, on the other hand, is a god who freaks out the second anyone gets stronger than a Super Saiyan. So what really happens when the ultimate cosmic beast goes up against the most panicked deity in Dragon Ball history? Let's start with Broly first. Now, of course, Broly fights with a level of raw, uncontrollable rage that completely bypasses any form of martial arts training or any form of martial arts discipline. When Broly steps onto the battlefield, there is no strategy, there is no tactical planning, there is no restraints. You understand? His style is built entirely on overwhelming with physical dominance and essentially cashing in on an endless reservoir of explosive energy that grows rapidly the longer Broly stays engaged. He doesn't have to throw precise punches because he doesn't have to necessarily look for technical openings. He can literally bum rush his opponents, slam them through solid rock, slam them through mountains, fire massive green energy blasts in every direction, and still have success because to Broly, combat isn't just an art form, it's not a test of skill or anything like that. It's just pure chaotic release of, in Broly's unfortunate traumatic case, suffocating power. And he treats everyone in his way like an obstacle that needs to be not just torn apart, but like physically torn apart. So Broly's mindset during battle, if you're thinking about it, he's driven completely by blind screaming instinct. Whatever he knows, that's just what he's going to do until he's told not to do it. You cannot reason with Broly. You cannot trick him with complex mental games. You cannot intimidate him because his rational mind completely shuts down once he goes berserk. Broly doesn't care about taking heavy damage. He doesn't care about leaving himself wide open. His body naturally serves as a tank in the Dragon Ball universe, and he can continue to press on without really stopping to breathe. That's also a scary thought. Broly does not have to fight for a crown. He doesn't have to fight for validation. He's not fighting out of malice even. He just doesn't care about ruling anything. He fights because his own overwhelming power drives him completely insane. That's what really makes Broly terrifying. No matter what the story is, whether it's the Toriyama story, the original Z story, Broly's overwhelming power drives him to complete insanity. We know this as the backs and the backings of his character, but inside the actual story, Broly functions as the absolute peak, in my opinion, of untamed mortal potential. Because his role in the Dragon Ball universe, his narrative is to completely break the power scaling and force the heroes to realize that years of disciplined god-level training can still get completely overrun. And technically, we saw that in Broly's movie. Everything Goku and Vegeta had done, Broly showed up. He was learning how to fight in the midst of fighting them for the first time. Vegeta, said that more than once. And then they were at a point where fusion was even looking like it wasn't going to be enough until, obviously, you transform into Super Saiyan and then Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta. So when Broly shows up, the standard tactical playbooks go completely out the window. You cannot outsmart a hurricane that's still going to hit you no matter what you do. Broly exists to bring raw, primal terror back into the Dragon Ball series. And you're probably wondering, well, where the hell does this leave the Supreme Kai? Let's get to that next. Yeah, it's pretty stark, right? The contrast in regards to what happens when a total genetic freak relies completely on mindless, planet-shattering rage and power, essentially, to make themselves legit. And no one would take that away from Broly. How could you? But again, the Supreme Kai, he shifts focus to a god himself that spends half of his time sweating in the sidelines, not actually participating in the fight. The Supreme Kai fights like a nervous office manager who accidentally wandered onto a battlefield and realized he's completely out of his depth. And I swear to you, I have always felt this way about the Supreme Kai, but when I write it, when I look at it, and then I see it happen, it's like, oh yeah, he really behaves as someone that doesn't want to get involved at all, but yet his job is low-key to get involved to some extent. Supreme Kai doesn't have a rugged frontline martial arts style, right? He relies on his weird, highly specific, divine-driven magic or his paralysis techniques or telekinesis to freeze opponents in place before things get too violent. That's kind of what his job, his responsibility is. But when he actually has to step up into a fight, well, then the Supreme Kai's posture becomes rigid, he becomes more cautious because he is entirely unused to dealing with raw, unbridled, unfiltered aggression. You see, Supreme Kai's approach is built on avoiding direct physical brawls, using his god status to keep the other mortals, the other beings, at a distance, in check, right? To Supreme Kai, combat is not a sport. It's an honorable path, or life and death even, in some extreme cases. which can make it, I would say, essentially terrifying, extremely terrifying for the Supreme Kai, because his messy failure is not just one failure. It falls back on him. It falls back on Lord Beerus, which we saw in Dragon Ball. So usually the Supreme Kai, his cosmic duty is to resolve any issue with as quick of a spell as possible so he can go back to his quiet planet existing, not being bothered by anyone or anything. The Supreme Kai's mindset during a fight or a match, it's going to be defined purely by his unadulterated panic that he is unfortunately mixed with a sense of outdated authority, where he has the authority, he's the god, he's in this realm of the Dragon Ball hierarchy that kind of exceeds the normal mortal realm. And even still, every situation the Supreme Kai has been in or has been involved in, for the most part, depending on how you see his work, you will say, okay, I respect the Supreme Kai, he does his job. Or there are some people that may say, I don't respect the Supreme Kai, not because he doesn't deserve respect, but because he's not very good at his job. The absolute second someone reveals something massive in the Dragon Ball world or a world-breaking power comes about, well, his composure, as you can see throughout most of the history, completely evaporates, right? Because Supreme Kai gets incredibly overwhelmed by unexpected variables. He's not particularly good in the moment, I would say, at adjusting, but he knows it's his duty to have to adapt to what's happening. He's going to spend way too much time, as myself, overthinking the worst case scenarios and freezing up because his initial plans failed. You know, he doesn't fight out of bloodlust. He never will. He doesn't have a desire to even get stronger. It's like the Supreme Kai purely is going to fight on preservation, on keeping the cosmic status quo in check. Stop ancient threats from waking up. Majin Buu, Mora, so on and so forth, right? But I think in the same essence, it's that complete lack of actual combat grit that makes the Supreme Kai one of the most vulnerable characters in the entire show. Because the moment that an opponent ignores his whatever his divine status is, what does the Supreme Kai really have to threaten them or to hold any serious power, right? So in closing, I think in the Supreme Kai's actual story, he functions purely as a glorified hype man for the villains, because his main role in the narrative of Dragon Ball is to show up, drop a bunch of terrifying lore about how dangerous the new threat is, and then to sweat profusely about it while the Saiyans, the Super Saiyans most likely, actually handle the threat. That's more or less been his role in the show since Dragon Ball Z. So I think he exists to bridge the gap between the mortal world and the cosmic hierarchy, acting as a warning system that alerts the heroes when the universe is in legitimate danger. You're not hearing from the Supreme Kai if there's a butterfly out there causing no harm to anyone, right? Supreme Kai is showing up because there's probably a reason for him to actually show up. He has a massive amount of technical knowledge, and his constant state of panic kind of serves as a good permanent reminder that holding on to a fancy title in Dragon Ball doesn't mean that you can keep what you have. You must continue to train. You must continue to align yourself with the right people in order to see that come to fruition. And I think Supreme Kai finally slowly figured out aligning himself with the Saiyans is better. And even still, he'll probably panic before the Saiyans solve the issue.